Have you ever wondered how much the world spends to combat terrorism? Imagine for a moment the staggering numbers. From 2001 to 2021, the United States alone has funneled approximately $8 trillion into operations against terrorism. $8 trillion. That's a number so vast, it's nearly impossible to comprehend. To put it into perspective, if you were to stack 8 trillion $1 bills, the pile would reach roughly 540,000 miles high. That's more than twice the distance to the moon. But the cost isn't just financial. The human toll is devastating. Countless lives have been lost, families torn apart, and communities shattered. And yet, despite all the money spent and all the bloodshed, the threat of terrorism remains. So, we have to ask ourselves, is there another way? Could we be fighting this battle more effectively? Noted Italian judge and anti-mafia prosecutor Giovanni Falcone once said, "Follow the money." This simple phrase encapsulates a powerful concept. By tracing the financial sources of criminal enterprises, we can potentially disrupt their operations and perhaps even dismantle them. Now, apply this concept to terrorism. Terrorist organizations, like any other organizations, need funds to operate. They need money for weapons, for supplies, for recruitment, for logistics, and this money has to come from somewhere. So, where does it come from? How do these organizations finance their operations? Well, the methods are varied and often quite complex. They range from straightforward cash donations from sympathizers and supporters to more covert operations like drug trafficking and ransom kidnappings. Some organizations even divert funds from charitable donations, using the cover of philanthropy to funnel money into their illicit activities. And when these organizations gain a certain level of power, they can exploit the resources of the territories they control. Groups like ISIS and Boko Haram have done just this, taking control of resource-rich territories and selling those resources illegally to bankroll their operation. Perhaps instead of sending armies, we should be following the money. But where does this money come from? The next few minutes will delve deeper into this question, illuminating the dark corners of terrorism financing. One might think that terrorist organizations rely solely on the generous donations of their sympathizers. However, this is only part of the equation. Now let's delve deeper into the intricate world of terrorism financing. Picture this. You're a supporter of a cause that you believe in so much that you're willing to put your money where your mouth is. You decide to make a donation, a cash donation to this cause. This is a common scenario for many supporters of terrorist organizations. They make donations, often in cash, to these organizations in a bid to keep them operational. But let's not get carried away. While this might sound like a significant source of funding, in reality, it's not enough to sustain the operations of large terrorist organizations. The costs involved in running these organizations are substantial. We're talking about everything from purchasing weapons and equipment to paying operatives and informants to organizing training camps and launching operations. It's a costly business, so how do they make up for the shortfall? Well, some terrorist organizations have developed sophisticated networks to collect these donations. They employ couriers, use hawala systems, a traditional system of money transfer used in Arab and South Asian countries, and even exploit online platforms to solicit funds from their supporters globally. However, the truth is these donations only form a fraction of the overall funds that terrorist organizations need to operate. They need a lot more money to sustain their activities, and they have to find it from other sources. These sources can range from illegal activities like drug trafficking and kidnapping for ransom, to exploiting charitable organizations and controlling resources in territories they've seized. But we'll dive into these other sources of funding in the upcoming segments. For now, it's important to understand that while cash donations from sympathizers and supporters do play a role in financing terrorism, they're not the sole source of funding. While donations do help, they alone cannot fuel the machinery of terrorism. So what else is in the mix? When donations fall short, terrorist organizations often resort to the darker side of finance, criminal activities. In the murky world of illicit commerce, terrorism has found a home. Drug trafficking, for instance, is a lucrative business, and terrorist organizations are not above exploiting this underworld market. From the poppy fields of Afghanistan to the cocaine trails of South America, these organizations have their hands in every piece of the drug trade pie. It's a double-edged sword of destruction. The drugs wreak havoc on communities, while the profits fuel the machinery of terror. The money, often in the form of cold, hard cash, is virtually untraceable, making it an ideal source of funding for those who operate in the shadows. But the underbelly of crime isn't limited to drug trafficking. Ransom kidnappings are another method these organizations use to fill their coffers. The victims are usually innocent civilians, their lives pawned off for hefty sums. The emotional toll on families is immeasurable, and the financial burden often devastating. Yet the ransom money serves a singular purpose: to purchase weapons and supplies that further the organization's terroristic agendas. The chilling reality is that these criminal activities are not just a means to an end. They are, in fact, integral to the sustained operations of many terrorist organizations. The illicit profits are a lifeline, enabling these groups to grow, recruit, and carry out their destructive plans. What's more, the criminal activities often serve a dual purpose. They not only provide funds but also help to spread fear and chaos, which are essential tools in the terrorist's toolbox. The destructive cycle is self-perpetuating, with the proceeds of crime fueling further acts of terror. Criminal activities provide a significant chunk of the funding for terrorist organizations, but there's another, more insidious method at play. The next layer in the complex web of terrorism financing is even more deceptive, hiding in plain sight under the guise of charity. But that is a story for another scene. Imagine a charitable organization ostensibly working for the good of society being used as a cover to fund terrorism. A disturbing thought, isn't it? Yet this is a reality many of us are unaware of. In the complex world of terrorism financing, the wolf often hides in sheep's clothing. Charitable organizations, the very institutions we trust to help those in need, can be manipulated and used as agents of terror financing. But how does this work? Terrorist organizations set up or infiltrate existing charitable organizations. On the surface, these organizations appear to be working for noble causes: education, poverty alleviation, disaster relief. They collect donations from well-meaning individuals and businesses around the world. But behind the scenes, a portion or sometimes all of these funds are diverted to finance terrorist activities. This method is alarmingly effective due to the ubiquity and sheer volume of charitable giving worldwide. It provides a continuous, reliable stream of funds, often in hard-to-trace cash. Moreover, it's a method that's hard to counteract. After all, who would suspect a charity of such nefarious activities? However, this doesn't mean these organizations operate without scrutiny. International bodies and national governments often impose sanctions on charities suspected of funneling funds to terrorist groups. But here's the catch: these organizations are adept at dodging sanctions. They change names, locations, and even their entire operational structure to evade detection and continue their operations. And so, the cycle continues. Money intended to help the less fortunate ends up being used to inflict harm and spread fear. It's a grim reality, and one that underscores the complexity and insidious nature of terrorism financing. The exploitation of charitable organizations provides a steady stream of funds for terrorism. But what happens when a terrorist organization gains the power of a state? The answer to that question brings us to our next and final method of terrorism financing. Stay tuned. When a terrorist organization grows powerful enough to control territories, it gains access to a new, significant source of funding. This statement is a stark reminder of the strategies employed by groups like ISIS and Boko Haram. Let's delve into how they exploit the resources of territories they control. Imagine the vast landscapes of the Middle East and Africa, rich with natural resources, oil, minerals, and fertile lands. Now picture these resources being seized by terrorist organizations. These groups don't just take control of territories for strategic purposes, but for economic ones as well. ISIS, for instance, once controlled large swaths of oil-rich land in Iraq and Syria. They didn't just hoard this black gold, they sold it. They found buyers in black markets, willing to turn a blind eye to the source of the oil. The revenue from these illegal sales became a significant part of ISIS's funding, enabling them to continue their operations and expand their influence. Similarly, Boko Haram, operating mostly in Nigeria, has exploited the country's rich mineral resources and fertile lands. By controlling agricultural outputs and mining operations, they have created an additional revenue stream, supplementing their income from criminal activities and donations. But it's not just about oil, minerals, or agriculture. These groups also exploit human resources. They impose taxes on the inhabitants of the territories they control. These taxes, often collected under duress, add another layer to their funding model. So, what we see here is a complex, multifaceted approach to financing terrorism. It's not just about cash donations from sympathizers or profits from criminal activities. It's about exploiting territories and their resources, both natural and human. So, the funding of terrorism is not just about donations or criminal activities, but also about exploiting resources. The fight against terrorism, then, is not just about armies, but also about disrupting these financial networks. The battle isn't just waged on the front lines, but in the intricate web of financial transactions that fuel these organizations. Understanding this is crucial as we continue to seek effective strategies to dismantle these networks and curtail global terrorism.